Production funding for Behind the Headlines is made possible in part by the WKNO Production Fund, the WKNO Endowment Fund, and by viewers like you. Thank you.
MLGW's president and CEO on TVA, MISO, and the future of power in Memphis. This week on Behind the Headlines. I'm Eric Barnes with the Daily Memphian. Thanks for joining us as we continue to do the show remotely. This week, we take a third part in a series of shows we've done on the big choice facing MLGW and the city of Memphis on where it will get its electricity going forward. For 80 years, the city of Memphis, through MLGW, has gotten electricity from TVA. Last week, we had the president and CEO of TVA on the show. The show is available on WKNO.org, as well as the podcast version is on dailymemphian.com. And 2 weeks before that, we had two members of an advocacy group that is pushing very hard for MLG&W to explore, if not sign up with, MISO, a big electric cooperative that provides power to some of the states nearby. And so for this week, I'm pleased to welcome JT Young, President and CEO of MLG&W. JT, thanks for being here.
Thank you for having me, Eric. Thank you. Glad to be here.
And Bill Dries is reporter with the Daily Memphian. So in the past 2 weeks, I've done the big intro with a lot of background. I'm going to go ahead and skip that this week. Bill has been writing a lot of stories. Other folks in town have been writing stories. And we, again, have the two shows we've done that set up this very complicated issue. And JT, we'll try to go through some of the details, some of the nuances. Again, the issue is very complicated. And it's not a decision necessarily that has an impact tomorrow. It's a very long-term decision. I think everyone agrees with that. This MLGW has to give 5 years notice to break the contract with TVA, and it has a renewal on the table. But I want to get right to MISO because there's just so much. It's unclear to me, and I follow this pretty closely, whether and how MLGW has explored the option of getting electricity from MISO, the big electric cooperative that provides power to parts from Louisiana up to Canada. Have you pursued at least a proposal from them?
Well, Eric, let me begin by saying that early last year, we actually began having conversations with representatives from MISO, the Mid-Continent Independent System Operator. And we began talking to them, actually went and visited with them at their headquarters, learned a lot about their operations, trying to understand how they do what they do. One thing I want to clarify, and I'm sure your listeners viewers may know this, MISO is sort of a marketplace, if you will, of energy, of generation and transmission. It is not a utility like TVA. MISO members are utilities, and they bring their assets into this marketplace. And MISO, if you will, as a nonprofit, sort of oversees how that all gets allocated. And so what we are aware of is that there are options out there where we could join MISO or otherwise take power from members of MISO. And we've been investigating that. But really, the biggest thing that I want to make sure everybody is aware of is that it's real, because this is such a big decision, as you mentioned, Eric, it's a huge decision. What we really wanted to do, and we did this beginning last spring, late spring, we began at the end of the IRP process, or the Integrated Resource Plan process, which is the process by which we have been going through now for several months to determine really the optimal way to get power to our community. My focus has always been around, I've been agnostic. I've told folks I'm agnostic as to the supplier, but one of the things that's important to remember that's valuable from my perspective and my experience is we want to make sure that we have a reliable source of energy, of electricity, and a reasonably priced source of electricity. And we also want to make sure that it's environmentally sensitive and that we've got some stability around pricing as we go forward. And so there are a number of other factors that are at play here that we want to make sure is incorporated. So the IRP process, the Integrated Resource Plan process, is a process that tries to integrate all of that into a recommendation that will come. And the draft of that IRP will be out there and available for public view and comment for at least 30 days. And so we want to make sure that, and then once that's done and a final version is available, then I'll go to the board and been working with the city administration, and we've been, attached at the hip for several months now on making sure that we're doing what's best for everyone, that we're not just focused narrowly but broadly.
Let me say too that we are taping this Thursday afternoon. The IRP plan, the one that will be available for public comment, should be, by the time people are watching this on Friday night, it should be on the MLGW side. I believe it will likely be on the Daily Memphian side as well as and elsewhere. So again, a bit of a time warp as we tape this before that plan has come out. And you, as we talked about before the show, you have not seen that plan at this point as we tape this show.
Right.
So the idea that MLGW took MISO off the table as an option, that's incorrect?
That is absolutely incorrect. And I think I'm not seeing the draft IRP, but I have been involved. You may be familiar with this team we call the PSAT, the Power Supply Advisory Team.
Yeah.
That team has been meeting now and providing input to Siemens, our consultant, on this integrated resource plan for several months. We formally stopped meeting at the end of February, and there will, of course, as you mentioned, the PSAT will be meeting tomorrow to review the draft. But throughout this process, we've had conversations about MISO, and MISO has been, and I'm sure this will be shown when the IRP comes out, that options including MISO are always on the table as TVA and what have you. So it's not, I don't know where that notion came from that we've not been talking to MISO, but we've been engaged, and MISO's been engaged. Siemens has been talking to MISO. MISO's had representatives at the PSAT meeting to listen in, as has TVA. So that's the reality.
All right. Let me bring Bill in.
JT, let's walk through the process on how this works, because I think there needs to be some clarity about this. You are going to make a recommendation to the Memphis Light, Gas, and Water Board at some point after this public input period. And then they're going to vote on that recommendation. And if they decide to stay with the Tennessee Valley Authority, is the issue dead there, or does it go to the city council anyway?
So under the scenario you just proposed, Bill, the notion would be if we make a recommendation to our board and they opt not to follow, if that recommendation is to do something other than our current situation with our current supplier, if their decision is to not do that and they don't, proffer another option, then the fallback is the default position is where we currently are. So that's correct.
Okay. If the city council were to take some action, or the mayor were to say, well, as city government, we want to look at a proposal from MISO, would the Light, Gas, and Water Board be compelled to act on that proposal?
So it's very possible. The board, as you may know by charter, has the responsibility to make a decision around power supply with regards to electricity for MLGW. Certainly, if a proposal comes in, the board has the ability to review that, to make some decisions based on that. I will just add that the IRP process that's been going on now for several months, the integrity of that process we've tried to maintain throughout. And that process, the way it's set up now, if we were to recommend something different other than staying where we are in the default position, it will require probably multiple RFPs, not just one, just because of the nature of what would be required. So, and then subsequently, of course, the city council has a responsibility to approve those contracts, any contracts for the RFP or any request for proposals or any subsequent contracts for actual power that's in excess of 5 years. The city council, of course, would have to approve that.
And a final point on process for now, and then I want to get to one other question about this. If Memphis Light, Gas, and Water signs up with TVA for a new 20-year contract or a new 5-year contract, whatever that is, does that too go to the Memphis City Council for oversight and a vote? Yes,
it's my understanding that if any contracts for purchases like that, Our board, of course, would have to first approve it. Subsequent to that, if it is a contract in excess of 5 years, the city council also has to approve that contract. Correct.
Okay. But before I send this back to Eric, at a city council discussion earlier this month, you told the city council members that you felt it would be impractical for Memphis Light, Gas, and Water to go with an entity like MISO if Light, Gas, and Water did not in some way generate some of its own power. What did you mean by that?
Well, early on last year, we actually had an evaluation that was done by an entity called GDS and Associates. And they essentially were evaluating a prior proposal that we had received. And the output of that, one of the outputs of that was that certainly MISO is an option. One of the things that everyone, I think is really important to understand, because I think sometimes the perception is that MISO is like TVA in the sense that TVA is a utility and MISO is not. That's not the way MISO works. However, if we were to treat MISO as we do TVA and just assume that we could interconnect with MISO with just a transmission line only, my point of reference in that statement was that's a risky bet to just go in from a transmission standpoint without having our own generation. And that's just based on input that we've received along the way. We've actually had that conversation in some of the PSAT meetings. So part of the value, and we had that from our original study from GDS. And it's largely due to the fact that we are a large electric user, right? So we use a lot of energy. And going into MISO, in fact, we had the conversation with MISO when we visited with them, and they gave us the indication that based on our size, 90% of the MISO members have their own generation, right? So it would be an anomaly and an oddity for us to do that. And really, based on my preliminary understanding, a fairly risky bet when it comes to reliability.
Am I right, JT, the Allen plant, the plant that TVA built, the new plant, gas-fired plant that was finished a couple years ago, replacing the old, dirtier coal-fired plant, that only provides, is it 20 or so % of the power, the electricity for Memphis?
So the proper way to think about the Allen plant, as I understand it, it's probably about a little more than 20. It's about a third of our peak load or so. But it's not. But the thing to remember is they provide that plant generates electricity and puts it out on the TVA grid. So technically, that plant does not necessarily just generate electricity for Memphis. That energy goes out on the grid, and because of the interconnections of the TVA network, we get electricity from all over TVA's footprint. So we don't just get it from that plant.
Yeah, and I think, thank you. That's a good clarification, because I do think that and I think I had this maybe a year ago as this whole process sort of began to be talked about, that was MLGW's plant, or that it was, solely dedicated to Memphis because it's within Memphis and it's on, so I think this interconnectedness is very important to clarify.
Yeah, and there was a time when MLGW did own that plant years ago, but certainly not now.
And so to that end, if MLGW needs to determines that it's going to take on some amount of power generation, what form might that take and how would it be paid for?
Well, in the PSAT meetings that we've had, in the various scenarios that have been considered that we've talked about, we are looking, of course, at options regarding generation that would be, could be renewables, and that mainly solar, just because of where we are. Could be gas-fired generation, which has a much lower carbon footprint than, of course, coal or whatever, and they're very efficient. The plant you just mentioned, the Allen plant, is a gas-fired combined cycle, one of the most efficient ones in the world. And so we've evaluated combustion turbines for peaking capabilities. So we've evaluated a number of different options for that. And the reason that is important is because we want to make sure that, so today we don't have to concern ourselves with what we call capacity or our needs that we need at any given moment in time for electricity. If we make a decision to leave TVA and do something different, all of that will fall really on us, and the arrangement that we have, whether it's with MISO or what have you. We need to make sure that we have what I'd call a hedge against price instability and reliability concerns. And the best way to do that is to have some type of generation that's dedicated to our needs.
And that, I mean, again, I'm asking you to speculate, but I mean, is that $1 billion? And is that a bonding? I mean, is that multiple billions of dollars? Is it, I mean, what kind of cost range are we looking at?
Well, in the PSAT meetings, and I'm going from memory, Eric, so don't.
Fair enough. Yep, fair enough.
But it seems to me that because we'd be in a scenario where we're talking about having to construct generation, you know, a generating plant itself can be $1 billion or more just for that, right? And then you have to think about additional transmission, additional right-of-way acquisition. So to say that it's billions plural is appropriate. I can't give you an exact magnitude of what that would be.
And that would be a decision, I assume, that would go through council, not just MLGW. I mean, all parties would be be a part of that. Okay. Yeah. We're about halfway through the show. Let me go back to Bill.
So the whole generation question here kind of leads to another technical part of this, and you referred to it, the balancing authority. Currently, there's an organization called ACES that, as I understand it, it basically acts as the balancing authority for MISO and for other people as well. Should Memphis Light, Gas, and Water, if this happens, and it's a big if there is a switch from TVA, should Memphis Light, Gas, and Water undertake to be its own balancing authority, or do you think it should contract with an organization like ACES?
Well, the key thing there, Bill, to remember is as we don't have generation, nor do we have the personnel to support generation in our staffing model right now. There are a number of things required to be a balancing authority whereby you actually make sure your load matches the generation that you have, and so that you've got things in an equivalency perspective. Whether it's ACES or we do it ourselves, or we, join an existing balancing authority that's a part of the MISO footprint or not, that's again left to be decided. Again, that may be included in the draft. There may be something that speaks to that in the IRP that I've not seen yet. But I will say that it is a very significant undertaking to go from zero, where we are today, to becoming your own balancing authority. That takes quite a bit of effort. And we would certainly want to partner with or contract with or whatever it means. And if we did it on our own, it would require us to certainly staff up and get the type of talent we needed to make sure that works well. That's very important in the power business.
Mm-hmm. When you talk to the city council, I think some people heard you talking about generating power, and there may have been the assumption that, okay, well, that's a foregone conclusion in terms of the scenarios. The integrated resource plan include the look at what would happen if MISO were the supplier of electric power to Light, Gas, and Water, and Memphis Light, Gas, and Water did not generate its own power. That will be part of the IRP?
You broke up on me a little bit there, Bill, but if you're asking about will the IRP consider the generation configuration in a MISO scenario, it does. Whether or not that generation is local here in our footprint or other locations, my guess is going to be that there will have to be some additional generation or capacity. You got to remember, MISO again is a marketplace. MISO is not a utility, and so entrance into MISO by an entity our size will my sense is require that there be some capacity that comes along with it, because if it's an efficient marketplace, then you've got things balanced out pretty well. So here we are coming in with our size load. We'd have to come in with something, or something would have to be constructed to help facilitate the needs that we would have. And I'm assuming that's not there today, but we may find out different.
So the scenarios include Light, Gas, and Water generating its own power, and scenarios will also include Light, Gas, and Water not being in that generation business, but possibly other suppliers who could fill that need.
Exactly. There could be scenarios like that. We could be generating some, taking some from MISO. We could be, if we, or we could be or someone else could generate on our behalf. We could do bilateral contract. I guess there's all kind of options around getting that additional capacity if we were to leave TVA. But my understanding is that's got to be part of the equation.
All right. And before I send this back to Eric, we talked on the show last week about the offer that the Tennessee Valley Authority has been making to all of the utilities that it supplies electric power to, a 20-year term, possibly a 5-year term. Are those talks on hold while this process is underway, or where is that?
Yeah, we opted last year when that 20-year opportunity from TVA presented itself. They shared that with all of the local power companies, all 154 of them. 90%, more than 90% of the LPC served by TVA signed up for that. We did not sign up for that, primarily because we wanted to make sure we got through the IRP process before we made any decisions around that. And so at this point, we've not signed it. We are considering all of our options. If we end up staying with TVA, maybe that's a route we take, maybe not. But that's not something that we've availed ourselves of at this point.
Is it not true? I mean, part of this process is a negotiation, right? I mean, the TVA has put this, last week when their CEO Jim Lash was on the show, he talked about $20 million a year in savings from where we are now, maybe another 15 million through efficiencies that they felt like they could help bring to Memphis. They talked a lot about incentives, economic development incentives that they do now, but doing more of them. He brought up the old Allen plant, and they do have a responsibility, separate from anything, to clean up the environmental problems there. But he talked about giving that over to the city as part of the port expansion. I mean, you talked at the top of the show about the very important issues of reliability, consistent. How does this get done? That's obviously, I think everyone wants that, but doesn't the option of MISO or other suppliers create more leverage for you, MLGW, and for Memphis, especially given that Memphis is the largest customer within the whole TVA network?
Well, I'd be speculating, Eric, if I were to say that we had more leverage. I really honestly don't know. That may be a better question for TVA. We've enjoyed a long relationship, very reliable service, reasonable prices. And one of the things that we have to make sure we look at is ensuring that for our customers at the customer level, that the recommendations that we make will be in their best interest for the long term.
Right. If there are savings, and again, TVA, if you renew a TVA, they're talking about 20 million in savings at a minimum. Where do those savings go? I mean, is that reductions in the rates that customers pay? Is that money that goes into the infrastructure? You've talked a lot since you took the job, some years ago, about deferred maintenance and the need for upgrades. Is it given back to the city, to the general fund? If it's just $20 million, where would that $20 million go?
Well, today, the way it's structured right now is our customers, those cost savings that we would receive from a wholesale power scenario, those savings inure to the benefit of our customers. They've made the investments in our system. And so the way we look at this right now, I'm looking at this, is what do our customers pay today? It's competitive. Can it be better? If we achieve savings, those savings get passed on to our customers. That's great. I'm all for that. It helps reduce the energy burden. It helps a lot of ways. So we're looking at what does the customer benefit look like from a cost savings. You got to remember that if there's a proposal out there that says we can save 30, 40%, you got to remember where we are today. As a sanity check, our customers pay about 10 cents a kilowatt hour, residential customers. At a 35 to 40% savings, that's about 6.5, 7 cents a kilowatt hour of power. That's unheard of. There's no MISO, there's no entity of MISO that's our size that has that kind of price to the customer. So as a sanity check, we're trying to just make sure we're balancing everything. That's why the IRP is so important, is because we're seeking to get to the real truth of what the opportunities are for our customers.
We have just 2 minutes left. Let me let Bill get one more question in, and then I have one more question.
All right. Talking about the sanity process, once the IRP hits, once it is out there, how much maneuvering is there going to be by the various factions, do you think?
I wouldn't dare to speculate on that, Bill. I suspect there's a lot of interest in this by a lot of folks, and that's great. That's why we had an open process with the Power Supply Advisory team for over the last year. But I'm sure there'll be a lot of interest and a lot of speculation. It's very important for people to understand that the Integrated Resource Plan process is the process by which I will bring a recommendation to our board. I realize there have been a number of proposals and thoughts and all of that. Those generally have had an end in mind objective, and so, but this IRP process is an objective look, and we're going to do our best to make sure we stick by that as we make a recommendation.
The advocacy group who's pushing for MISO, they're talking about $450 million in savings a year. Have you been able to replicate that math?
So a scenario might show that. A scenario might show that if you just took the prices from the MISO today, and if you made some assumptions about what TVA prices will do in the future, you could get to that point. Again, the IRP process looks deeper than that because there are things that I don't know that the study that showed $450 million actually got a price forecast from TVA. And I don't know how far they looked out on the MISO forecast as well. So anybody can generate numbers, and that's great. But we need to make sure that we are doing this with validity, things that can be substantiated for the long term, which the IRP process is trying to do.
Okay. And again, the IRP is been released since we taped this. It should be on the MLGW site. I believe it'll be on the Daily Memphian site and elsewhere. JT Young, thank you for joining us. We're out of time. And that is all the time we have this week. Please watch past shows on WKNO.org, or you can download the podcast wherever you get your podcasts, including the Daily Memphian site. Please join us again next week.